Hi and welcome. This is a new format. I call it the IoT Tech Talk. In the Tech Talk, I will invite several guests and I will speak to a specific topic. And then in the current Tech Talk, I have decided to talk about C# microservice development. I have invited two guests, and maybe Jan, Jörg, you can introduce yourself.
So my name is Jan-Michel. I'm working as a consultant for Software AG since about 4 years. So mainly in the IoT sector, in microservice development. So in my first years, I mainly did Java development, but now the current projects had the requirement to use C#. So they didn't want to use Java anymore. So in the last years more C# development, but in general microservice development, all languages, and that's basically it from my side for now.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Jörg, you?
Yeah, I'm Jörg Hartmann. Well, working for Software AG since my entire life, so to say. So now part of Cumulocity R&D, working as a software engineer, so basically focusing on all the Java topics, to be honest. So we not decided to leave Java behind. We are still focusing on that.
But you also had some experience with C# and contributed a few stuff. This is why I invited you.
Yeah, I just didn't really want to answer this question. I don't really have experience with C#, to be honest.
Okay. Then maybe I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Stefan. I'm the developer ecosystem manager for IoT. And I doing stuff like this, organizing events, bringing people together, talk about stuff, organizing event, also writing tech articles. Even Jörg, you don't have so much experience with C#. Let's still talk about it. But at least you, Jan-Michel, you have some experience. You already shared some experience that you're a consultant and you worked in several projects. And so I assumed you had some projects where you were in touch with C# microservice development. So can you please share your story, how you...
I think my camera just
no problem
didn't work for the moment. So in the I think last 2 years we had a big customer in the energy sector that basically wanted to use C#. So they have all the infrastructure in C#. They also use Microsoft Azure a lot. And so they kind of have an ecosystem they are using and they want to keep using. So we first try to convince them to use Java, but we didn't have that much success in that. And I mean, like, I can understand their point. They have developers on their side. Usually, from my experience, the customer wants to use their technologies, and so they can use their expertise in the best ways. So starting with this project, I also, to be honest, I didn't do that much C# development over the last years as well. So in the last 2 or 3 years, it really started again. So in my first years of my career, I did some C# development for I think about 3 or 4 years. Then the focus switched a little bit to Java, and now with the current project, C# again. So in the end,
but this might change in future, I guess.
Right. So I think this is the consultant lifestyle. So you basically do what the customer, the technology that the customer wants. You have to adapt to that, and that's why I think it's also important to have tools to be able to adapt very good.
I think that's the key. Yeah, we have heavily invested in some Java SDK in the past, and we also have a lot of developers implementing microservice and other stuff in Java. I also learned programming in Java, to be honest. Yeah, so I also I would say a core Java guy, but people are evolving, and I would say even the younger generation most likely not always using or wanted not to use Java, but use other technologies like, you know, TypeScript, Python, and so on. And the goal, I think, from Cumulocity and a development perspective is to be open, that we open ourselves up, that we do not force people to, you have to know Java to implement something, to implement the microservices. And that's why we in the past, we also have slightly invested in a C# SDK. But from my experience, where I was in a role as a pre-sales consultant, it was not very adapted from our customers, yeah, to be honest, because I would say it was like a side project or something, I don't know. But people or customers complained about it. And that's the reason I would say that we still have the Java SDK, but now we also learn from our customers in the project, and that we developed something new. You had your project, Jan-Michel, where you were forced somehow to do some C# development. But can you share what you actually did? How did you started the microservice development? Did you just do everything from scratch? Did you build some kind of framework? Did you use even the old SDK? How did you do it?
Yeah, so the first approach was actually going to GitHub and checking if we have some public SDKs that we can use. So I found the one that you were just talking about,
Yeah.
and I had a look on it, and I quickly noticed that that's not really helpful for us.
For what reasons?
It's quite a long time ago, so it really did. I think it did reflect the REST API, but all the other stuff. So like that you want to bootstrap your application, so that you want to have a bootstrap user, and for multi-tenant microservices, this wasn't supported. So this is, I think, a main part that is really important to have for every customer, that you have the possibility, for every language that you have the possibility to do that. Yeah, and the overall, as you already said, is what was kind of a side project. I also saw that the last commit dates were very long ago, so it probably wasn't maintained. It wasn't. I don't know if it was maintained, but it wasn't really maintained very good anymore. So what we first did after that is that we did everything from scratch. So we had our own custom-made API, so that we simply wrote code for the API parts of Cumulocity that we are using. So this was how we started with the POC, because nothing was there. But shortly after that, we Alexander Pester introduced the open API generated SDK to us, so that we basically can use the full functionality of the Cumulocity API and don't have to implement this code on ourselves. So this was then the point where we where we started to use it, and we were building functionality on top of that. So as I already said, so the bootstrapping mechanism was quite of an important topic for us. So we implement a bootstrapping mechanism that basically checks periodically if the microservice has been subscribed on a new tenant, or if the subscription has been removed from a tenant, and notify the application about that. What we also did is that we implemented a basic operation handling for per tenant microservices. So yeah, and another thing that we did is that we did a first implementation of the real-time notifications API. So first we started with the old one, then we switched to notifications 2.0 as well. So this is what we currently were working on in the project. And now in the last month, I tried to basically take some of the knowledge that we gathered there, and put these parts into an own SDK where you can use it, which is only related to Cumulocity, so no other domains or anything like that, and which then can be used furthermore.
And you just stated that you started from scratch implementing the API, and then you discovered that Alex mentioned that there's some open API generated, and this is also why we have Jörg here, because he's working in that team somehow.
I have to say sorry to Jan, because at the time, well, Alex Pester told us they need something for C#. We have not even started implementing it. So Jan, you had to do some manual coding because we needed some time to ramp everything up. Sorry for this.
But Jörg, this is an interesting point. Your team and you worked on some cool stuff that is using the open API specification to generate clients, not only for C# but also for other programming language and environments. Can you share a little bit about it?
Yeah. So, well, we started this journey. Oh, when was it actually? Just a long time ago in the past. Well, we were freshly working on the sensor app, and well, as this is available for iOS, Android, of course, this app has to talk to Cumulocity as well, right? So even with Android technology or iOS stuff. And so this app used two clients, obviously, in the two languages, written differently, different naming, just horrible. Every time we started a new feature for sensor app, we had to evolve the clients even further and just first of all added features just to get whatever entity from Cumulocity. So that was well not a situation a developer wants to be in. So then at this time we figured out, well, what when we describe this API with OpenAPI and then use some code generation magic we had used in the past to apply this to OpenAPI and then generate some source code out of it. And well, we started a single POC for Android, and this was working quite well. And then luckily for us, later on, we find out the documentation team went ahead and they started to migrate the existing documentation into OpenAPI. So that was pure luck for us because we were about to do the same thing, which was I think today we would not been finished that, to be honest, because there's just so many things in there.
It's a heavy API.
Yeah, I think 200 operations plus, and yeah, I don't want to.
And still not everything is documented, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so good for us. There was an OpenAPI which we could use as inputs, and then well, documentation team and us work together. So we gave feedback on how we can improve the OpenAPI so we can generate better codes and add some more features to them. And then suddenly the Java and iOS clients evolved. And that was also the time I think Alex Pester made his first experience with a generated Java client for the project. I don't know, to be honest, what it was. And then he was in love with everything and asked us to come up with a C# client. And well, as I stated in the beginning, as we roughly have no experience in our team with C#, yeah, it started a bit rough, but I think it's a great success story because we work together with professional services, with Jan, with Tomek, and also with Ashwin from R&D to come up with the client very well, I think.
So in the end, to summarize it, in the end, you use the OpenAI to generate, I would call it some kind of low-level client for the OpenAPI documented API for Cumulocity. So Jan does not have to implement how to create a measurement, how to create a device, all this kind of stuff, like just write another client to do all this stuff. So this API, so the core APIs is already implemented in the generated client from the OpenAPI. And then, as you said, Jan-Michel, you actually implemented some stuff on top which is relevant for your project, I guess. Yeah, like you said, the bootstrapping, the operation handling, which is not so easily generated because it's, I would say, it's some logic, which is more like higher SDK. But you don't use or implement it all that only. You use the generated client from the team von Jörg and integrated that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's basically correct. So, for example, for the bootstrapping, we just use like the, for example, the current user API of the generated library, so the normal endpoint of Cumulocity, and we use this to then get the service users, for example. When talking about authentication, then we also use endpoints from the generated library to, for example, check for the current user. So if the current user is available. So it's basically a tool set for us to use for every functionality that we want to build. So another example that we did is that we also wrote some inventory helper functions. Let's call it like that. So, for example, when you want to request all manage objects of a specific type, we implement the function for that. So as an extension on top of the core Cumulocity library, which then in the end uses the inventory API and the child device API. So basically a combination. And yeah, that's the main aspect for us, so that we can use the API.
So it makes for the developer more easier to develop and to concentrate on the business logic for the microservice and not how the API of Cumulocity has some special things like to query all devices of a specific type and with a specific name and so on. But can you maybe? You said you took the thing from your project and you implemented in a generic thing. I guess it's open source project now.
Yeah, right.
Which can be used also by other customers. Can you share it to us that, and can you roughly introduce it to us, maybe on an example if you have one? So
yes, I can do that. So let me share my screen for that. So it's quite already it's still quite new. So
yeah, of course. You're still a consultant working in project. I think I would say it's kind of a side project for you, right?
Right, yeah. So last changed 2 hours ago, and I think I just put it to public today. So actually quite new. So
perfect timing.
Yeah. So maybe I think we can maybe go to the README a little bit to show what functionalities we offer, which prerequisites we have, and yeah. So basically after that, some points for the future maybe. So everybody that reads this README, so I didn't want to explain in this README how Microservice SDK in general works on Cumulocity. So a prerequisite for basically using and this SDK is that developers should read the basic concept page of the Microservice SDK, and after that, so that they don't have to explain topics like bootstrapping in here, because they are already explained somewhere.
Yeah, maybe shortly describe that for the people who are not aware of what bootstrapping is. It's like Jan-Michel already said, to get a service user from a Cumulocity tenant or more Cumulocity tenants and get the authentication done automatically in your microservice. And normally you do this by polling regularly, because it could be that new tenants are subscribed to your microservice, and then you get additional users, and you should use these users all the time. So in your microservice you develop, you don't have to take care about that and get the authentication for specific tenants and so on. This is what we call kind of bootstrapping for multi-tenant microservice.
It's a great thing, by the way, because it's something we cannot automatically generate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's also a part which we have to add to all the other repositories, to be honest. So
and this is, I would say, this is one part which is implemented in the Java microservice. So if you have experience in developing stuff with a microservice SDK for Java, this is already implemented there. And I think you you already had maybe also some experience, and you did it very similar, I guess, to that, or?
Yeah, I did it quite similar. So I mean,
Okay.
like it's a key feature of microservice development that in most projects is used. If you have multi-tenant microservice, of course, you can also have per-tenant microservices. But I think for them, it is much easier as you already get the environment variables for your tenant that you are subscribed on. So yeah, as bootstrapping for multi-tenant microservice, as you said, it's exactly the way we did it. So we just poll for the service users of an application. The application needs to get the environment variables that are listed here. So basically the tenant, the bootstrap tenant, the bootstrap user, and the bootstrap password. And these credentials are then used by the application to poll for the service users. And in the end, we have to initialize the service. So we call the bootstrap service to basically do it once and on startup. And after that, we start the process that the Cumulocity core library factory credential refresh task is starting. So yeah, it's, this is the task then that is started, is polling for new subscriptions. If a new subscription is added, it will throw an event that the subscription is added. So service classes in the microservice can react on it. So I also know it from the Java world. So there's this annotation on microservice on microservice subscribed, I think it is called, where you can get a trigger when the microservice is subscribed on a specific tenant. Yeah, so I think this is important if you have some initialization task, for example, on a tenant. So if this microservice is subscribed on a tenant, you want to initialize something or something like that. The same for the subscription removed. So when a subscription is removed, there's also an event handler for that. And maybe we can take a short look into the example in the code.
You implemented an example?
Yes, I implemented some examples. So
is this also part of the GitHub repository, or is it another GitHub repository?
This is also part of the GitHub repository.
Okay.
Yeah. The example makes it more easy for us to copy this for our clients.
Yeah, in the end, so maybe we can check the subscription handling example first. So it's quite small. So I think we can even go through almost every line. So
can you make it a little bit bigger that we can?
Yes.
Thank you.
So what we do is that we basically set up our dependency injection and all the services, the host and stuff like that. So the first thing we do is that we configure health and metrics. So I don't want to go into much detail here, but in this startup class we have our best controller information. So I think this is called like or .NET defaults. So with this command, we inject the Cumulocity configuration from Cumulocity platform so that the interface, so this interface can be used by our classes. Here we add the Cumulocity core library provider. So as I already told, so the process that we can init or refresh our service users, and we can start the credential refresh process. So now we have this subscription listener example, and so this is using the Cumulocity core library provider, which I just showed in the README. So this is used for getting the Cumulocity core library for a specific tenant. So as I said, so it offers functionality like, so you can get all subscribed tenants, you can get the library for a specific tenant, and that's it basically. But you can also add event handlers to the library. So this is done like that. So you just add this your event handler to the event handler that is of the interface. And so the interface will then call your function when a new subscription is added or removed. So this is the small example that I created here. So this is basically just creating an event on Cumulocity when a new subscription is done. So yeah, so you can also kind of clean up your stuff, so you can get all the events that have been created because a subscription has been made, or you can get all the events that have been created because a subscription has been removed. And of course, there's also delete endpoints for that, so that the tenants where you play around with the SDK are not getting garbaged a lot.
Mhm.
So yeah, so this is a small example on the subscription handling. Yeah, so maybe then let's go on.
One question I might have, I'm not sure if you have this already implemented or is it on a list. Did you implement some health or metrics endpoint for microservice monitoring, or is this something which is to do? You did already?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So this is yeah. So I will come to that after.
Okay.
The other topics. Yeah. So then we did authentication for our REST controllers. So the Cumulocity documentation advises that for authentication, what you basically do is that you take the user that you are you take the user that called the REST endpoint and use the same user to access the Cumulocity endpoint. And this is exactly what we're doing. We are accessing the current user endpoint for that. And so we have authentication mechanisms for basic, for OAuth, and for bearer token. So I think these are the most commonly used. Yeah, if they are more, so I'm not aware of any other that we should implement, but if they are more, I think there's not a big problem to implement them, because they also use all the same authentication verifier, and this authentication verifier just takes HTTP headers, and it will use these HTTP headers to call the Cumulocity API. So in the case of basic authentication, it is just an authentication header. In the case of OAuth, it is some XRF token and some cookie header that you pass to this function. So yeah, it is HTTP header based.
But this is an interesting thing. You just said you take the user which authenticated against the endpoint the microservice is providing, and you take this to make the API calls. But I think you have two concepts at Cumulocity, at least in the Java SDK. You can use the service user, which is then use some global roles, and you can use, of course, the user who authenticates against the endpoint. Is it also possible in your SDK?
I'm not sure if so. This is just the authentication on the REST endpoint. So so
you just forward this to your
right. So I think it's not that important for internally hosted microservice, but if the microservice is hosted externally, so that we don't have the Cumulocity load balancer in front of the calls to the microservice, then we have to check the authentication on Cumulocity as well. So this is exactly what we are doing. So we are taking the headers or the authentication information of the user that called the API, the endpoint, and use the same for calling C8Y ourselves. So maybe some background on that. On our project that we worked on, we mainly had externally hosted microservices. So our microservices were hosted in AKS of the customer, because he already had this infrastructure and he wanted to use it for that as well. He didn't want to have another microservice infrastructure. So that's why I think it's especially used for externally hosted microservices. When you have internally hosted microservices and the credentials of the users are wrong, then it will probably not even get to the point where the SDK is checking if the credentials are right. Yeah, so maybe it's not that important for the internally hosted microservice, but especially for externally hosted. But in the end, in the microservice, so in most cases, I think the microservice is using the service user. So at least in the examples, in the projects that I have been working on.
Okay, good to know.
I haven't ever used, I think the
there
user
are just
that
a
calls.
few use cases, for example, where you want to use the user who authenticated because it only has some specific roles to see just a subset of devices maybe. This is a use case. And it should only retrieve the devices the user has access to. If you use a global role, most likely you get all the devices and you need to filter them somehow then if you use the service user. That's one of the use cases. But I think it's fine. I think you can implement it like you did. As you said, you're using service user all the time, and then you're just forwarding the authentication information and using not the service user, but the authentication information from the endpoints.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And so we also get the C8Y vaults in the controller. So we could so it's not that convenient as you know it from Cumulocity, from the Java world. So I think from the Java world you can do something like required roles or something like that. And so this directly checks it. To be honest, maybe there's some possibility in .NET as well, but I haven't worked on it. But at the moment you are able to get the roles like that. So you can the C8Y roles, and then you have a list of roles, and you can, in theory, check them for your permissions as well.
Yeah, okay. And you can define in the manifest if you want to create new roles for the microservice for especially your microservice, and then can add them here and checking if the role is assigned to a specific user. Yeah. Okay.
As I said, we have some inventory API helper, which I think this is. I don't know if this is general enough that we can, but I think it's many projects have this topic that you want to request all managed objects of a specific type or all managed objects that are found by a specific query or something like that. So we implement that here. We also implement some paging here. So I think this is some functionality that can also get extended a lot and maybe not used by everybody, but you can use it. In the end, it is all built up on the Cumulocity core library that is already part of the Open API generated library, and we just use that. And but so you can also find in this example project, you can find some examples on how to use it. And as you already asked for the health and metrics, so we have some default health and metrics. So we have implemented some default endpoints for the health and for the metrics. So I think the health endpoint on its own is not really doing that much if you don't add your own health check. So it is just returning up when the application is running. But you can also add your own health check. So you will see this below. And so the data metrics endpoint is exposing the default metrics like memory usage, thread usage, and basically system information.
In which format is it returned then if you call this endpoint?
I think it's JSON, but I'm not 100% sure. I have to check that. But it should be JSON, I think.
It depends. It depends. On the microservice, Spring Actuator uses the Prometheus format, and then you have some, I would say, like key value.
Right. Yeah, now I remember. Yeah, it's
similar to that.
Yeah, I think it's similar to that.
Okay.
haven't worked that much on that, but we also use Prometheus, so it should be similar to
okay.
that.
Yeah, then you can use it. I think Prometheus can also handle a JSON message, just on a configuration thing. But the standard Prometheus formatting is like, key equals value, and then you have your order matrix there.
Right. So so in the end, we have some health metrics startup which has the default settings, so you can use that. If you are using your own REST endpoints, you can extend the health metric startup with your own startup function, as I did it here in this example project as well. So I basically extended this that I want to have these 3 authentication methods. Then we have some default settings that you basically need every time you want to have controllers. And this is it for the REST controller example that we created here. So, and to add your own health check, you can also use this functionality here. So we configured our health metric startup, and now we have this extension method add health check, which adds an health check. And for that, in our example, we have in Cumulocity API health check, which just calls I think it's the current application endpoint to check if the Cumulocity API is available. So if we don't get 200 responses anymore from that, then we would then the application would report the down.
It's interesting. It's actually trying to reach the Cumulocity API and checks if the API is up and running.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then you can do something about it, do some retry and so on.
Right. You can also add your own health check. So for example, if you have some queues or some processing queues in your application and you want to monitor them, then you can also
any
say,
third-party endpoint you're integrating in your microservice, you can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the health check is the health check implementation is C#.NET default, but you can also you can add them like this to our health metrics setup. Let's call it like that.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, and so you also so functionalities that are not yet part of this SDK, but are already planned, are operation handling. So we had some operation handling in our project, but this was quite kind of per tenant based. So we didn't have the multi-tenancy aspect there. And so I want to rewrite this a little bit and after that implement it here as well. And the same for the real-time notification handling. So didn't have time for that yet.
Kind of related, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You want to get messages from the platform pushed in your microservice and do something about it.
Yeah. But in the end, this SDK can be extended furthermore. If we have more functionality that we want to add, we should add it. I think also it's helper functionalities like this inventory API helper are very useful for some customers that are using Cumulocity. So why not offer this possibility also to others? And yeah, so in the end, if we can extend this, then we should do this.
Yeah, it's still open source, right? Yeah, you just launched it. It's just public today. So I think we can spread the word about it and asking for feedback and maybe pull requests. So if people are happy to use it and adding some functionality, like the things you have added here, operationing and real-time notification, I think you might also invest some time in that direction, but be open for any pull requests from any direction, I would say.
Right.
Are there any other further next steps you're planning besides the things you just mentioned, the functionalities which are still missing?
Yeah, I think CI/CD is also a part that we need to add. So at the moment, you have to package this on your own. So what I would like to have is actually something that we either publish it here in this GitHub project as a package, So I have to do some research on that, or even push it to NuGet, to some public NuGet package. But I think we should maybe do some follow-ups on that, and also have some common way for also the OpenAPI generated library, and this in combination maybe.
Yeah, that if the OpenAPI library changes, that you have some dependency management, that you get it automatically merged in, and we also maybe have some workflows, GitHub workflows generating new binaries, release binaries you might use, or publish them directly to NuGet, as you mentioned. This would be pretty awesome. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Something we have to do as well. So we are lacking a bit CI/CD as well. So explicitly, I had a couple of questions when we are ready to push this to NuGet, and unfortunately, we still have to wait for this. But that's one of the next points. We need to publish it better than we are doing it right now.
Yeah. So
the generated client is only published in GitHub, I guess. It's also not in NuGet, as you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we did there in the project is that we built it, that we published it to the private NuGet of the customer, and then we can use it.
Yeah, sure.
So I think we will. So my idea would be that we adapt to the OpenAPI generated library, and we basically use the same approach here. So this would be, I think, the best way.
Okay, sounds awesome to me. Anything else, Jörg and Michel, you want to discuss?
Yeah, from my side, it's hard because, well, if you're working with code generators and you have a state where you are happy with the generated code, then there isn't really much you have to do except maintaining your input. And maybe I can briefly talk about this because we started a new initiative to health check the Cumulocity IoT OpenAPI file. So as this was handwritten in the past, there are a couple of minor issues which we like to resolve, and we decided to go here with a generation approach as well. So we are working with the core teams to produce automatically an OpenAPI file from core directly.
So it's the other way around, yeah? You're not having a documentation team, is trying to find out what has been implemented and then doing a spec about it, but from the core which has been implemented, generating some OpenAPI file and then generate on top of that some clients. That's what you're saying, right?
That's what I'm saying. And once this is done, there can be a full CI/CD chain implemented. So once there's a change on core, especially important when we are talking about continuous deployment and delivery, every change on core will be reflected in the OpenAPI. Every change reflected in the OpenAPI will trigger a build on the generated clients, and so on and so on.
And will then end up in some pull request, maybe in Jan-Michel's GitHub repository.
Yeah, that would be nice.
That sounds awesome.
But it's still quite a long way to go. I just wanted to teaser this. Maybe we can talk about this process in more detail in a couple of months.
Maybe we do a follow-up if you're ready, and then we talk about this in more detail.
Sure thing.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Just a few remarks. If you listen to the Tech Talk and you have some comments or you have some questions, just use the comments. I will upload this Tech Talk to YouTube and also to the tech community. So you can use both the YouTube and tech community comments to ask us questions, and I will make sure it will be answered. And if you like the Tech Talk, just give us a like. Thank you, Jan-Michel. Thank you, Jörg, for attending my first Tech Talk ever. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks as well.